Hello, I welcome you to the Illuminated Conversations podcast. I am your host, Brian M. Truskowski with Illuminate, and today on the sixth episode, I am pleased to interview a dear longtime friend, Deva. He is part of the Krishna House here in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and he shares his beautiful story of a long version of the story, which is great because he actually shares all the details of what led to his breakdown and then waking up and then ultimately finding God, in this particular case, Krishna, through the Krishna House, the collective in Detroit, Michigan. So it's a beautiful story, and I wanted to bring him on to share because I feel like a lot of people share their stories of transformation in traditional senses, and I wanted to bring on someone who I know in the spiritual world, in the spiritual community, and share his journey of how he found God, because I think that's such a beautiful story and a beautiful thing for people to hear, because that's not always the story that people hear. I don't know about you, but I don't typically go up to my spiritual leaders and say, how did you find God, right? And so it's beautiful to hear his story. All right, well, please stay tuned. It's well worth it, and I know you're going to love it. So be well and enjoy the show. Yay, hello, Deva. So grateful to have you on the show today. Hari Krishna, thank you for joining us. So Deva, please go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you offer us in the world.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. It's happy to be able to carry our conversation into the interwebs. Deva Madhava Das is my Hari Krishna name. My dad still calls me Devin, so I don't mind that one either. And I grew up in North Carolina and kind of ran away to Detroit. And I think that's mostly what we're going to be discussing today. From my journey running away to Detroit, since then I've been a part of helping to develop a spiritual community out here in Ypsilanti, known as the Harmony Collective. And that's branched off to a few other efforts. Ananta Wellness, which is kind of a professional effort, and then Bodhika, which is a media-based effort. So those are my three big efforts centered around the spiritual community that I'm happy to be part of.
Nice. And then also there's the up and coming restaurant as well, right?
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. I'm a moral support and a kind of, it's my brainchild in a way, but the folks who are really running it day to day are really running it. So I don't even so much think of it as mine, but yeah, we have Gora's Grill, which is our vegetarian, vegan fast food. It's all vegan except for the mango lassi. So it's basically a vegan place. And we're happy to bring fast casual, down home American style vegan to folks here in Ipsy.
That's awesome. I love that. And I just love the fact that, just to touch on it, how sometimes our transformation can start small, but the seeds, one flower produces thousands of seeds that then produce, so it just sort of keeps going. And just in the conversation and transformation, I never thought about that, but right, we plant one plant, whatever it be, fruit or corn or flowers or whatever, but then it just keeps producing abundance of seeds.
That's a beautiful point.
Yeah.
There's a story with Narad Muni, who's one of the famous sages from the Vedic times, and he saw one shoemaker who had deep faith, and he was impressed by this because the shoemaker basically, he had this interaction with a priest, and the shoemaker showed himself to be of stronger faith. And Nard was kind of surprised by that. You'd expect the ecclesiastical person to carry a stronger integrity to truth. And so he asked the shoemaker, how can you see how can you have such a transcendental vision of the situation? And he said, if our Lord can put a banyan tree inside of a small seed tinier than a grain of mustard, then he can do anything. To your point.
I love that. Absolutely. Well, and even in that, a friend of mine said the other day, she said, the trees, it's winter time currently in Michigan in the north, and the trees now are budding, and in those buds hold all the information for all the flowers and leaves that will come from it. But it's such a compact version right now, right?
Beautiful.
It's already prepared. So with that, with the story of transformation, I'd love to open the floor for you to share your experience of, like you said, the transformation from North Carolina to Detroit, and how you found God, and why I want to share this with people, because I feel like there's not a lot of, I want to open up the conversation for people to have, I found God in my transformation. A lot of people have that in their spiritual awakening, and then you took that to the next level and opened a collective. And so go ahead and please share with us a little bit of your journey.
Thanks, Brian. I'll have to start off when I was young, just to talk about that seed of inquiry that I kept nourishing throughout my life. and at times tried to ignore but couldn't put aside ultimately, and really spurned me to put everything aside until I answered some fundamental questions. I grew up in basically like a low income, the hood. I was a white kid, but everybody else around me was some kind of minority, and all of us didn't have much money. But I had a really strong family unit, and I had, family in the suburbs, so to speak, that were well-to-do. So I experienced some affluence in my life, and I also experienced just the care and nurture that I got from my parents. And I noticed that that wasn't the case for most of the people around me. And I saw that contrast growing up through elementary, middle school, and high school, that I was having a very different experience of the world than most people, even though externally our situations are very much the same. And that spurned a kind of inquiry inside of me that why doesn't everybody have it easier? Why does it have to be difficult for so many? And also why, when you show people how it can be easier for them, why are they kind of averse to that? Why is that difficult for them to take on? And those questions just churned inside of me always, this vision of inequality and seeing that it's not necessary. There must be a way where we can all actually feel fulfilled and happy. And that brought me to study politics and the social sciences when I was in college. And I was frustrated with that after a few years because, as many of us probably have become.
Yeah.
And I remember my religion and philosophy professor, I felt like this would be the class. I had such high hopes for that class. And I'd heard from other people, it's a great class. I learned so much. I thought about things in a way I never had before. And when I got in the very first day, I remember the professor saying, we're not going to answer any questions in this class. We're not going to come to any conclusions. And I was very frustrated because I was already in that space where I recognized there was a lot of questions, but very few answers in the world. And I became despondent at that point, sophomore year of college, and got into a very kind of melancholy place where I started to reject the good upbringing I'd had. I started to reject the opportunities I had in college. I was a part of a business making or a money making adventure. Excuse me. This group of people that taught college students how to sell books door to door. And so
that's foreshadowing right there.
Yeah, totally. So if you know anything about the Hari Krishnas, it was a bit of a, Krishna was training me up before he brought me into the community. And so with that book selling adventure, what they would do is kind of recruit kids on a campus. So I went to North Carolina State University, and then they would move us all to another part of the country for the summer. And we would have to kind of dive into that community. We would beg a place to stay. We would get given a kind of territory there and meet about 3,000 families over the summer. And you did really well if you treated yourself as a part of the community, not like a fly-by-night salesperson, but really tried to invest yourself and know, like, what is the high school algebra teacher who gives the most homework, and who, which football team in the area did the best last year in high school sports, and like really just get into people's deal and get a sense of who they are. And I really liked it as an opportunity to get a sense of what's this world that I'm living in? What do people really care about? I started sitting down in the homes of Americans in New York, Oklahoma, Arizona, Texas, Missouri. These are some of the places I went through my college years. And that adventure became less and less about making money and more about trying to figure out what's this world about and what's that common thread that can give us all happiness. Because that was my inquiry from childhood. And it never stopped. It just continued growing. That tree continued growing. And I was perpetually more frustrated with people's unwillingness to even ask the question themselves or have a conversation around it.
Right.
They didn't want to have somebody challenge their established norms, essentially, and their idea of, good enough is okay. And so that was kind of fueling my sense of rebellion. Like, all right, I don't want any of this stuff. I don't want to pretend like I want to live these people's lives when I get to be 30 or 40 or 50. And that kind of came to a head in Highland Park, Chicago. Have you ever seen that movie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Oh, yeah, I think a lot of people have.
Yeah, it's a classic. Or 16 Candles also.
Right.
Quintessential suburb. So both those films were shot in the place where I was, Highland Park, Chicago, just before I ran away to Detroit. And the company that I sold those books with door to door they had stationed me in that place. And it was the nicest place I'd ever been stationed in terms of selling to a group of people. And it was there that I really just became totally clear on not wanting the Stepford life, the classic American dream of a big house with a front lawn that looks like green carpet and a brand new car in the driveway and a wife who's 50, but she looks like she's 35 because of all the plastic surgery.
Right. The American dream right there.
The American dream, it right in front of me. I'm on a movie set, literally. And it was there that I deeply felt I never want to have that. That's not what I'm going for. That's not what my life is supposed to be about. And probably their life's not supposed to be about it either, because I was seeing, although they're living it, I've been in dirt floors, houses with dirt floors, and felt a deeper sense of fulfillment and happiness from some of those people than I do from these people with marble floors.
Isn't that something, how we have this vision of money and wealth will bring us happiness, when in reality, some of the happiest people are the most impoverished financially, in the world.
Absolutely.
Right?
Those with the least means.
Right.
London Economics School of Economics, they did a study in 2009. It was like a big, 2 decades. And the happiness quotient, figuring out what's the happiest country on the planet. And it was Bangladesh. And it happens to be that the Hare Krishna movement was started in Bangladesh. But from the London economic vision, that's like literally, that's who makes my t-shirt. Those are the poorest
Right.
people on the planet. And yet that's where they found the most happiness. So I was beginning to recognize something to that more and more. I'd felt it my whole life, but it became very clear in that place in Highland Park. And somehow in my heart, there had been this increasingly growing voice of go to Detroit. Very, very loud. That voice had become at this point, but it had been planted back in March. And this was late June now that I resolved, okay, no more Highland Park. I'm getting on a Greyhound bus. I have a bathing suit. I have 3 t-shirts, and we're headed to Detroit.
Beautiful. Let me just pause you before you get there. I want to tell you that I had a similar experience. I think I was 17, raised Roman Catholic, never believed a minute of it. And I finally looked my mom square in the eyes and said, Mom, I'm not going to get married, have the wife, the house, the 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, the dog, the cat. And she started crying. I said, that's never going to be my path. Because, that's the American dream, and that's what she wanted for her kids. But, so I just want to say, I hear you in that. Like, it's right. Stepping outside the norm.
For sure. And I think that quietly, everybody, all children and teenagers have a sense. We look at our parents and we realize they're not happy, right? So
Right.
what is this logic that I'm supposed to become like them when they are not satisfied? Clearly,
Right,
they're not
right.
fulfilled in their life. And so it was really that presence, being in the the Stepford neighborhood of Highland Park, Chicago, that I really just got clear and was able to boldly declare, like, I don't want this. But I didn't know what I did want. So I get on the Greyhound bus and I show up at 6 a.m. in Detroit. And it's like tumbleweeds are rolling down the street. It's like this is 2010 and Detroit hasn't been so revamped. Let's not get into that. But Detroit hasn't been so made over yet, especially downtown. And it just looks desolate and abandoned and something like a third world country. And I feel right at home.
Wow.
I have a sense like, yeah, this is where the truth is at, because I had this intuition that Detroit is kind of a canary in the coal mine of America. And America's been living on borrowed time and borrowed money and borrowed existence for a very long time. And the rooster is coming home now, and we're going to have to face some of that soon. And I wasn't wrong, I don't think. And that's continuing to play out now. But I felt like Detroit is where reality is present. And even though reality isn't so rosy as Highland Park was, at least it's honest. It has integrity. And so I can deal with that. I can hopefully find some truth here. And so the second day I was there, the first day I was homeless. I slept outside for a day. And then the next day I went to Indian Village and kind of begged my way into somebody's house. Indian Village is where the Chrysler and Ford and Dodge and those guys used to have their houses before they moved out of the city. So it's a bunch of old people now preserving those houses, no kids, just a big house to try to take care of, and 7, 8, 9 bedrooms in each house. And so I had a habit from this company. We would go and look for a place to stay so we wouldn't have to pay rent. We would just give a small, like nominal, $100 a week or something, $100 a month, whatever the person wanted. So I found an arrangement similar to that in this neighborhood. And I started going downtown and looking around and starting to go door to door, not to sell anything, but just because that was my habit of,
Yeah.
of getting to know a place now. That's why I wanted to connect directly with the people and ask them what was going on. And so I was going downtown to start and look around and get a feel. And I noticed there's this big, like, something happening. And it doesn't look too corporate. It looks more like hodgepodge hippie vibe, which is something more along, bohemian, something along my lines. But it was happening in downtown and like in a big corporate building. And so I come down to what is actually Cobo Hall. That's where they have the Detroit Auto Show, if you've ever been down there.
Many times, yeah.
So I didn't know, I didn't realize that's where this was yet, but Cobo Hall had been taken over by the International Justice Conference. And what that basically is like a Comic-Con for nonprofits. It's like where all the do-gooder organizations come to rally the troops and share information and aggregate together. And recognizing the desolate situation in Detroit, they all decided, let's go to Detroit that year. So there was this big happening at Cobo Hall, and I felt like, wow, the universe has called me here. I was beginning, there was a budding sense of divinity in my life. The atheism that I developed at age 17, 18, 19 to kind of justify my hedonism, it was waning. And I was beginning to see, like, actually, I don't want to cause suffering to others, and yet I'm kind of helpless to do that. So I was getting a sense of a need for some connection to divinity to relieve me of that implication in other people's suffering, somehow to provide an alternative to what I felt in every relationship, be it my family, my girlfriend, anyone. The aggregate was just pain on both sides. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want that anymore. And so desperately wanting to see some alternative, I was beginning to accept the idea of some version of God. So I was like, wow, the universe, God has brought me here. I'm going to find my tribe, to use modern parlance, somehow in this, aggregate Comic-Con of do-gooders. I'm going to find my people. And for 3 days, I diligently went to every table, every person, and I heard their spiel, and I sat with some I talked for a long time. And they had their cause, save the bees, save the whales, save the immigrants, save the women, save the children. And it was compelling, all of it. It's like, yes, that's a problem. And I'm glad you're doing something about it. At the end of it, though, I was just left with a deeper sense that nobody knows what's going on. Because here's all these people that are recognizing and pointing out all these problems. And yet nobody seems to be recognizing that if there's all these issues in the social body, there must be a deeper problem. There must be a virus which is causing that sore throat, that stuffy nose, that fever, that headache, that rash. If all these things are wrong, then those must be symptoms of something much more fundamental. And I could feel that nobody here is willing to talk about that.
Wow. Yeah, that's great awareness at that age. That's awesome that you had that.
Well, that was a real, talk about a moment. I was despondent, but all the more resolved, like I'm getting closer. Although I've had to give up and I felt like dejected in one sense, I felt very hopeful in another sense that I'm really weeding out what the answer isn't. And in the yoga practice, it's not a bhakti practice directly. It's more a part of the Gyan Marg, but it's called neti neti. Not this, not that. Maybe you've heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard it, neti, but not this.
Not neti pot.
Right, yeah. Neti, not this, not that. Right, yeah.
Exactly. Not this, not that. I'm not my body. I'm not the country I'm from. And so I'm not, the problem is not that the women don't make as much as the men. Now that's a problem, that women are not paid the same for doing the same work as men do.
Right.
However, there's many other indications of injustice and inequality and lack of consciousness, which is pointing towards something else which none of these people seem to want to discuss yet or know themselves. So I left that Comic-Con of charities feeling despondent, but also hopeful. And a little interlude, which I won't get into the story of, because time and etc. I had just ridden my bike. So just after this Comic-Con, a few days went by. My cousin calls me. She's in Chicago, thinking I'm still there, and she's visiting there to go to a Cubs game. She says, "Hey, do you want to come and visit me?" And I'm like, I'm not there right now, but I'll be there in 2 days." So I ride a bike back to Chicago. Yeah. And I hang out there for a few days, and I happen to meet a friend very serendipitously. And I'd already decided, let me just stay in Chicago. I don't want to ride my bike back to Detroit. Let me
Right.
just live homeless in Chicago for a summer. It seems cool. And my friend says, "Hey, you seem like something's happening for you in Detroit. Let me take you back there." I'd painted a rosier picture than what the reality was. And so my pride made me, suck it up
Mm.
and get in the car and accept her offer to drive me back to Detroit. I like enrolled her in this grandiose scheme, which wasn't actually anything I planned on following through with. And while I was in Chicago, I'd met another friend who gave me Eckhart Tolle's Brave New World.
Hmm.
Is that it, or Brave New Earth? I always Brave New World is the Aldous Huxley novel. A
Okay.
Brave New, a New Earth. I
A
think
new,
it's
a
just
new,
called
a new earth.
New
A
Earth.
new
Yeah,
earth.
yeah,
Yeah.
a New Earth.
Yeah.
And I'd had that book when I was 19 and an atheist. Somebody had given it to me, and I didn't have the patience for it. But now I had the patience, and I certainly had the time. So I sat and read Eckhart Tolle's book on the bank of the Detroit River after this Comic-Con experience, having a very nihilistic conception of, what's the point now? It was a lot of melancholy going on. And I finished the last pages of the book on the Detroit River on the backside of the Renaissance Center, if you remember, the Renaissance Center.
Yep. Yeah.
And I felt this great wave of relief that it was clear to me now all the pain, all the trauma I've caused other people, and I've had caused to me, I've been implicated in, etc. None of that is real. None of that is true in the ultimate sense.
Mm.
I and they are something better, something different. And it was a huge relief having read that and understood that through his teachings. However, I had this question in my heart now, okay, what do I do? I
Hmm.
still don't know what to do to not implicate myself in that suffering.
Right. You're still at the bottom of the pit. Yeah.
Exactly. The trough is still there. And so in my heart, as clear as the answer go to Detroit, the next answer came serve. It was like a word that I just
Mm.
heard very
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Serve. That's what you do. You have a mood of service. And I was like, all right, well, how do I do that? And I looked around me and I realized I'm in a park. I'm on everyone's enjoying the water and the fountain back there. The kids are splashing and playing and running around. And there's trash, and that's not nice. So I started to pick up all the trash. And I got down on my hands and knees. And for 4 hours, I was picking up every cigarette butt, every little candy wrapper, like meticulously combed every blade of grass in that little park back there for anyone that's ever been, or if you go. And after 4 hours, I felt like I looked out at the big city of Detroit and I just again felt despondent. Am I supposed to clean up all of that? It's like back to that feeling of the charities, right?
Oh God.
This is just a symptom, but I'm not serving the highest. What's that service I can do which will allow me to have the impact of cleaning the deepest level, the deepest way possible? What is that service? And it's in that hope, that feeling of humility and embarrassment and hopelessness all together rolled in, that I was going door to door and I met a Hari Krishna,
Mm.
going door to door, knocking house to house, and I happened upon the house of the temple president of the Hari Krishnas.
I just want to pause and just note the irony in that, right? Again, I mean, this is just my own humor, spiritual humor, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's not lost on too many people that I was selling books door to door before I met the Hare Krishnas, who of course love to sell books and often door to door. So the guy, of course, a little in between there, but skipping ahead a few steps, the guy himself, the Hare Krishna, was also quite wasn't missing the spiritual irony of the situation. That here's this like hapless-looking teenage kid in front of him selling books door to door. So he sits me down for an hour, and after that, I buy his book instead of him buying mine. Rather, he gives it to me as a gift. He's a very kind person, Bharat. He's a wonderful soul. And I don't remember a word he said to me. I just remember how I felt after speaking to him.
Mm.
I'd met so many people over my 5 years of going door to door that wanted to tell me about God and wanted me to tell them they were right in their version of who God is. And I'd grown up in the South, so I'd already had a strong taste of that, and a strong aversion to any vibes of conversion, religious doctrine, etc. Just clearly that's not the answer.
Mm.
But after sitting with Bharat for an hour, what I really got the sense of was that he didn't care whether I said he was right or wrong. He was just really having an experience of something himself that was profound and satisfying. And he wanted me to feel that same experience. He wanted me
Mm.
to have an opportunity to connect with that thing that he was connected to and believed in as much as I believe in my mother's existence. He believed in that thing's existence that solidly and that certainly, even if I didn't ever participate or come or join or say anything positive about it. And it was so intriguing, that sense of assurance that he had, but also welcoming and encouraging,
Mm.
that I had to follow through and accept his invitation to come to the Sunday feast at the Fisher Mansion. It probably also helped that I was homeless and had no money, and they were offering free food at an old rich dead guy's house.
Right.
So I wasn't a hard sell in that sense either. But I was going for the right reasons, I'll say. It
Right,
wasn't
right.
totally just because I had nothing better to do and nowhere better to eat that Sunday afternoon. And I went and I found a group of people, and also I had the book at that point. It was a book called The Science of Self-Realization. And I had already become convinced once I opened the pages of that book that this is why I was actually brought to Detroit. This was
Mm.
why my heart had said way back in March, and now we're in July, go to Detroit. And listening had become worth it, reading the words on those pages, which answered the questions that everybody else had been angry when I ever asked.
Mm. Wow.
And just to kind of conclude, the 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 big, you could say, light bulb moment was when I visited the temple. It was wonderful. I got a copy of the Bhagavad Gita while I was there, and I began to read the Gita. And there, the first piece of philosophy that Krishna says to Arjuna, and I could empathize with Arjuna, his kind of despondence, he's having a panic attack at the beginning of
Right.
the Gita.
Right.
Arjuna's having a panic attack, and I could empathize. I'm like, I just had one of those. I'm with you. So I'm like, I'm vibing, right? And I'm like, all right,
Mm.
I'm ready. What is this guy Krishna gonna say? And Krishna, the first thing he tells Arjuna, never was there a time when I did not exist, speaking of himself, nor you, telling Arjuna, nor all these kings, pointing out on the battlefield of several million people, nor will there be a time in the future where any of us cease to be.
Hmm.
And that understanding was such a relief and such a profound distinction compared to the relativized concerns that I've been surrounded with my whole life, that I realized this is it. This is what I want. And this is what the people in Highland Park need. This is what the people in Highland Park, Detroit need. This is what the people back down in North Carolina need. And this is what I can give myself to giving for the rest of my life and feel satisfied and fulfilled that whoever takes it, I've done something for them. Whoever doesn't, that's okay. That it's not their time, but I did my best to share the best thing I know.
Wow. And that was just sort of the aha, like, oh my God, there's something more to life than the car and the mansion and the house in the suburbs,
And
right?
the skin color and the economic bracket and the
Right.
political party and the time of history I live in and the planet I live on.
Right. Right. Right.
Everything becomes relativized
Yep.
in that declaration that Krishna makes there. And it gets put in its actual subordinate position. And so then the irony is that later on, at first I thought, great, this is an excuse to never care about anything ever again. I don't
Deeper
have to have a bank
spiritual
account.
nihilism. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Spiritual. Now I'm spiritual. I don't have to care about any, spiritual bypassing at its finest.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I don't have to have a car. I don't have to have a bank account. I don't have to have a girlfriend. I don't have none of these things. So what I've learned is that it's not that you don't have to deal with any of those things. It's that now, because you recognize the actual position of each of those relative truths in your existence and what they're meant to support, which is basically to create a context for you to view your own soul, to recognize your own eternal identity through that relativized context, the contrast that's created there. In recognizing that, I'm able to live in an empowering way for myself and others in the world where not everybody wants to read the Bhagavad Gita, not everybody wants to hear that Krishna is God. That's okay, because just relating to the world with that pressure taken off, that today's goings on are not the all in all, and who's elected is not the all in all, and what's the size of my bank account is not the end all indictment on who I am as a person.
Right.
That reassurance in myself, I'm able to pass that along to others, and that in itself is a service. What to speak of if we can get into a discussion about higher principles if the person is ready for that.
Right, and I love that you take the perspective of, I'm going to offer you some baseline neutral information, and if you want to build from there, awesome. And if you don't, then be well, right? And that's fine too, right?
Amen.
So, I love that. And I know that's just the beginning of the new part of the journey that you went to from there, of developing that new community at the Krishna House in Detroit, and then serving, and then ultimately becoming. I mean, what is your role, you say, at the Harmony Collective in Ypsilanti? Is that like the director, the...
Yeah, community director is the term I like.
Right.
Because it centers me. That's another transformation that happened, and was recognizing it's not just about me and my service, but real service is that which supports others in their service when it's in harmony. And that's why with this name, we center ourselves around Harmony Collective. There's simultaneously a difference in my service versus your service. And there's something the same. There's a continuity also.
Right.
So if we like harmony, a mosaic, there's many different tiles with many different shapes and colors, and yet all that difference, when it's brought together in an expressive way, conveys one idea. All of those nuances convey, those differences convey one idea, and that's the simultaneous one and difference of spiritual life. We're all one, and yet we're all separate, so that we can convey and create this experience of love for each other. Right. So that was another kind of development, and maybe we can discuss that another time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was that saying? The sum is greater than the parts, right?
Nice.
Yeah. Yep. There's more eloquent. I think it was something along those lines. Well, this has been awesome, Deva, for you just sharing that. I just want to say thank you for taking us through that whole journey, because a lot of times people will just go, yep, this happened, then I got divorced, and then here's the final point. And a lot of times, like, it's not just down and then up. It's the long down and then the long back up again. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I imagine the journey continues as well for you as you continue to serve and grow and expand. So I just want to say thank you for sharing that with us. And it was beautiful to, I
appreciate you having me, Brian. One of my teachers, he says, progress is eternal. So that's another thing I've had to come to cope with, is that the effort never stops. Even when you're spiritual, even in the level of perfection, which I'm certainly not there yet, still there's endeavor at the stage of perfection. And that's in fact the indication of perfection, is that you're always endeavoring for that which is valuable, not only for you, but others.
I love that. I mean, for me, I would say everything all in divine timing, everything in perfect order, but I love how you added that part. It's all about the development and
Amen.
Evolution of it. What Deva mentioned, I think, is important in noting is this, that a lot of times when people don't know what to do in life, a lot of times they're walking parallel, like a half step off of the path that they don't understand. It's not going the way they want it to, and they're frustrated by it. And eventually some breaking point happens where they end up taking a half a step to the left, and they're perfectly in synchrony, right? With going from dissonance to synchrony. And it's so funny how myself, and I know a lot of people in the world and a lot of people I coach, have been in that position where it's like, I'm a half step off and I don't know how to get there. And then when they hit it, like when you hit that moment, you knew it. Body, mind, spirit, God, you knew it. And there was no question with it. So I wanted to add that because I feel like it's an important thing for people to know as they're on the journey too.
Amen. Yeah, progress is eternal. Don't give it. It's worth it when you hit that resonance moment.
Progress is eternal. All right. Amen, Jaima. There we go. Yay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Deva. It's been a pleasure to have you on the air. Be well. And also, if people want to learn more about the Harmony Collective, how can they learn more about that?
Yeah, come check us out. The website's there, theharmonycollective.org, or we're on Facebook. We have anantawellness.org also, if you're part of an organization that wants to bring some Bhakti principles in, but you want to keep it secular. We kind of took the practices that are universally applicable. Beliefs aside, the practices are really powerful. So like many other yoga traditions have done. So that's what we kind of did with Ananta Wellness. That's also anantawellness.org. So those are the two fun places to come check us out.
Awesome. And I'll have the links to those in the description below. So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the listeners. And as anyway, this is a conversation. So please share this conversation, share this video, share this podcast with anyone that you think may be interested in needing to hear this message, because it's about transformation. We're all going through transformation and it all looks completely differently. So thank you all for listening. I love all of you. Get out there, make a beautiful and blessed day, and know that whether you want to believe it or not, God is there serving you, whether or not you're an atheist or you're a Krishna or Christian or whatever you are. All right. Be well, everyone.
Hari Hari.
Hari Hari. Haribo.
Haribo.